Proverbs chapter 5 is a stern and sobering warning against the dangers of adultery and the allure of sexual immorality. Solomon, with the heart of a father, speaks directly to his son, emphasizing the importance of remaining faithful to one's spouse and avoiding the temptations that lead to moral and spiritual ruin. This chapter is not just a cautionary tale, but a call to embrace wisdom and integrity in relationships. Let's explore the key themes and teachings of this chapter, applying them to our lives today. The chapter begins with a father's earnest plea, "My son, pay attention to my wisdom, turn your ear to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge." Proverbs 5 verses 1 to 2. Solomon sets the stage by urging his son to heed his advice, emphasizing the value of wisdom in maintaining discretion and preserving moral integrity. Immediately, Solomon warns against the seductive power of adultery. For the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Proverbs 5 verses 3 to 4. The imagery here is vivid and powerful. The sweetness of honey and the smoothness of oil depict the initial allure of adultery, tempting and seemingly harmless. However, Solomon quickly reveals the true nature of this sin. It is ultimately bitter and destructive, like a double-edged sword that wounds deeply. This warning against the fleeting pleasure of adultery is a timeless truth. The initial appeal of sin often masks its devastating consequences. What seems sweet and harmless can lead to bitterness, regret, and spiritual death. James 1 verses 14 to 15 echoes this truth, stating, "But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full-grown, gives birth to death." Solomon continues to describe the consequences of following the path of adultery. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thought to the way of life. Her paths wander aimlessly, but she does not know it. Proverbs 5 verses 5 to 6. This stark portrayal underscores the ultimate destination of those who engage in adultery, death, and destruction. The adulterous path is one of aimlessness and ignorance, devoid of the life and purpose that come from walking in righteousness. The New Testament also warns of the consequences of sexual immorality. In 1 Corinthians 6 verse 18, Paul advises, "Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body." This highlights the unique and profound impact of sexual sin, which not only affects one's relationship with others and with God, but also harms one's own body and soul. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Solomon gives clear instructions on how to avoid falling into the trap of adultery. "Now then, my sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to one who is cruel." Proverbs 5 verses 7 to 9. The advice is straightforward. Avoid even the proximity of temptation. Solomon knows that the best way to resist temptation is to stay far away from it. The importance of boundaries is a recurring theme in Proverbs. It's not enough to simply resist sin when it is near. Wisdom calls for proactive measures to avoid situations where temptation might arise. This principle can be applied to various areas of life, not just sexual immorality. Whether it's avoiding compromising situations, unwise relationships, or harmful environments, the call is to guard one's path diligently. Solomon then paints a bleak picture of the consequences that come from giving in to the temptress. "Lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich the house of another. At the end of your life, you will groan, when your flesh and body are spent. You will say, 'How I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I would not obey my teachers or turn my ear to my instructors. And I was soon in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people." Proverbs 5 verses 10 to 14. This lamentation captures the regret and sorrow that accompany a life of unfaithfulness. The loss of wealth, the decay of the body, and the regret over ignored discipline and correction are all consequences that come from disregarding wisdom. Solomon's warning is clear. The pleasures of sin are temporary, but the consequences are lasting and severe. In the New Testament, Jesus speaks about the high cost of sin and the importance of cutting off anything that causes us to stumble. In Matthew 5 verses 29 to 30, he says, "If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell." This underscores the severity of sin and the lengths we should go to avoid it. After presenting the dire consequences of adultery, Solomon turns to the beauty and joy of marital faithfulness. Drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares? Let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. Proverbs 5 verses 15 to 18. This passage is a poetic celebration of marital love and intimacy. The imagery of drinking water from one's own cistern and well symbolizes the satisfaction and fulfillment that come from remaining faithful to one's spouse. Solomon encourages his son to find joy and delight in his marriage, cherishing the exclusive bond shared with his wife. Faithfulness in marriage is not only a moral obligation, but also a source of deep and abiding joy. The commitment to one's spouse is a reflection of God's covenantal love for his people, a love that is faithful, enduring, and life-giving. Ephesians 5 verses 25 to 28 highlights this parallel, where husbands are called to love their wives as Christ loved the church, giving himself up for her. Solomon concludes the chapter with a reminder that nothing is hidden from God. For your ways are in full view of the Lord, and he examines all your paths. The evil deeds of the wicked ensnare them. The cords of their sins hold them fast. For lack of discipline they will die, led astray by their own great folly. Proverbs 5 verses 21 to 23. This final warning underscores the futility of trying to conceal sin. God sees everything, and the consequences of sin are inevitable. The imagery of being ensnared and held fast by one's sins highlights the bondage that sin creates. Without discipline and wisdom, a person is led to death by their own folly. This truth is echoed throughout Scripture. In Hebrews 4 verse 13, it is written, "Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account." This serves as a sober reminder that our actions, whether public or private, are always known to God, and we will be held accountable. Be sure to check out the other videos to gain more wisdom and knowledge from the book of Proverbs.